Behold, a modern warframe for the modern age. This is high-tech Ivara, a warrior with thousands of special techniques, augmented by the latest technology. My name is Zandy, and I want to welcome you to FrameWork, a series of warframe builds and weapons built specifically for them. Like these high-tech trap discs that fire out crowd-controlling bullets for a limited time, and this massive great sword that hides within it a powerful drone that can attack your enemies from a distance as you pilot it through the battlefield. But of course, the piece de resistance of any high-tech build is a powerful sniper rifle that can engage enemies from a distance and kill them before they have a chance to retaliate. All of Ivara's abilities are pretty good, so it's hard to balance her stats, but I chose to go for efficiency and medium-high strength, allowing me to spam my energy-intensive abilities and do tons of damage with Artemis Bow. Duration and range don't scale very well, but we still want them at reasonable values to keep cloak and sleep arrows usable. Finally, flow and quick thinking make a perfect survivability mechanism here. Flow is already good for saving up tons of energy for big combos, like using your 2 and your 3 at the same time, more about that later. And having a big energy pool makes quick thinking better. Additionally, since we can be stealthed indefinitely with our 3, the stagger you take when quick thinking takes a big hit isn't very dangerous, because we're going to be stealthed. We aren't going to take follow-up hits, this is just to protect us from dying outright to stray fire. The slide bonuses on Streamline Form are mostly wasted here, but the holster rate really helps us swap between our 4 different weapons, which I really like. This build is maybe even a bit underformed though, and there's plenty of other things you could add to great effect. Now for an overview of our technologically advanced armaments. As Artemis Bow takes the mods off your primary, the Rubico is here as a weapon that happens to want the exact same mods that I wanted on my Artemis Bow. You could just pick any weapon in the game here and put whatever mods you want on your Artemis Bow on it, as the weapon you choose has no effect on Artemis Bow whatsoever, no matter what it is, but the Rubico is a sniper rifle which allows us to engage enemies at very long range, where Artemis Bow is weaker, and it happens to want primed fast hands, a mod that I personally really like on Artemis Bow because it allows you to knock a new set of arrows quicker after you fire. I'll show you in game, it actually does increase your DPS by a lot. So we're going to take out our Artemis Bow, and you're going to see that after firing a set of arrows, you could just keep firing, whatever, but you can also fire rapidly due to your increased reload speed. On bows, every kind of bow, not just Artemis Bow, reload speed increases the rate at which you knock new arrows, which means that you can fire again much faster. It's basically like a supercharged version of fire rate. And each fan of arrows only costs about 4 energy with the mods that we have, so you can span them out very, very effectively. If you prefer to fire sideways like this, then having increased reload speed means that you will be able to charge up your draw to the side instead of firing vertically in the time it would normally take you to knock the new arrows in the first place. And for goodness sakes, you've seen what the Rubico can do. The Rubico allows you to engage enemies at extreme ranges where your little survivability is not really a big issue, and the fact that you can't stay stealthed while firing the Rubico because it's not silent isn't a big deal because you're hundreds of meters away from the enemies. Likewise, Artemis Bow can be used as your weapon to kill enemies in your stealth ability. Silent weapons like bows and silenced other guns will not break Ivara's stealth, and you also get a pretty big headshot bonus while firing them while you're in your stealth. Artemis Bow can be used as this weapon. You do not need to add a silenced weapon to your loadout. Artemis Bow is already an incredibly destructive and powerful weapon. The Azima serves a very different purpose here. I've built this weapon very strangely for a mixture of clip size and a lot of blast damage. And the reason I've done that is that this weapon can control an area relatively effectively for a long period of time, which is something that very few guns can do. Let's just go back for a second though. This isn't even close to the build that I would normally use in the Azima if I wanted to use it as a normal machine pistol, and it is a fairly good normal machine pistol. I would normally run a mix of critical chance and damage and some corrosive. I don't really have this format right to make the build that I'm talking about, but just to describe, I would switch these with dual stat mods, although 90% elements are okay. And I would recommend targeting subsystem. This is actually one of the only weapons that I think this mod is good on. The Azima has a lot of spread once you fire for more than a few shots at a time, and it is a full auto weapon, so targeting subsystem significantly reduces the spread of the bullets, which greatly increases your DPS on targets at medium or further range. But this hypothetical build is not very good at controlling areas with the discs, and personally I think that's where the Azima shines. So instead of something like this, we're using this build, which is pretty terrible for firing multiple discs or shooting enemies, but it is very good for firing a single disc and having an environmental impact for a long time. So I put 5 level 100 bombards out here, and the way we're going to deal with them is just by peeking a corner, firing at a disc, and going back. And you're going to see in just a sec that they're the blast procs. Okay, so now we can just safely walk up to these enemies and have fun with them. we can stealth, pull out our Artemis Bow, and pop them for a quick little shot in the head if we like, which will take care of them in just a few shots. And as you saw, they were controlled, stuck on the ground for a very long time with just that one disc due to the increased magazine size. Now do you see the glory of technology, Tenno? In all seriousness, I actually do have one other suggestion. You may want to replace Tainted Clip with Creeping Bullseye. By reducing your fire rate, you're limiting how quickly the disc can get all of its bullets out of it. If you don't know, when you fire at a disc, it just is the entire magazine, and then it just depletes its entire magazine as quickly as it can by firing auto non-stop, and when it's out of bullets, it explodes. So if you reduce the fire rate, you get the disc firing in an area for longer. The thing that I found is that by reducing your status output per second overall, by making the fire rate lower, it wasn't that much of a gain, so I preferred having disc size, but this is a pretty big hit to your reload speed too, so anyway, do whatever you want. This is totally a good weapon. That was decent crowd control for just popping out a disc real quick. Oh man, and if you're wondering what we're gonna do while the enemies are lying on the ground, let's just do this again. So we're gonna hide behind this little pillar, wait for the enemies to notice us, peek and shoot at a disc, and then we're gonna swap to our Zenistar. We're gonna activate our third ability and our second ability, and then we're going to do a charge attack, which will release the disc. And we're going to kill them all. Since your 3 keeps that melee stealth damage multiplier on while you're piloting around your Zenistar melee disc, and your 2 allows you to increase its damage and steer it around, the Zenistar is a crazy good weapon for Ivara. I found that this build is just about the best you're going to get overall. Adding a off-kilter dual status mod like this actually does increase the amount of gas procs you get overall by a small amount, so I recommend it if you have it. It's perfectly fine to use the cold one instead, and it doesn't make a huge difference, but it does give you slightly more gas procs. And remember that since gas procs fire off a toxin damage over time effect when they deal their initial burst of damage, toxin mods on your weapon are going to increase your DOT, your damage over time, by the most. So you want to run Prime Fever Strike if you have it. It makes a very big difference here. Keep in mind that while flying around your disc, you can increase its speed using the left and right mouse buttons. So I'll left click and now we're going to go faster, and we'll right click to slow down, and you can like move around like this, yeah? So if you wish to move around from area to area very quickly, this can be very helpful. And Ivara's passive increases the area in which you can see enemies on your minimap, which allows you to know where enemies are without being too close to them at a greater range than normal. Awesome synergy! Let's look at the least whelming part of this build, which is Helios. Helios is not particularly good here, and if you don't have Helios Prime, it's really not a big deal. You're not really losing much. This is one of the least exciting Sentinel choices that I can muster, but go figure, I already gave you a bunch of cool synergies. Helios is good here because you'll get lots of stealth scans. I find that with Ivara, you most often get lots of useful scans because you can just see that it's scanning something and wait. You're never going to be screwed over by a stealth timer. He'll also patch you up a little bit, and go figure, just like every Sentinel, revives a bunch of times and can do sacrifice. Why is sacrifice not on this build? Look, I don't know. Ideally, your Sentinel is not really doing that much with this build, so just pick whatever you want. A quick little note about something that excited me greatly but doesn't actually work. There's an augment for a Navigator called Piercing Navigator that increases your critical chance with the projectile you're flying around by a lot, like a ton. It doesn't work with a Zenistar, so just forget it. No, that doesn't work. Sorry. Oh, I can see that I've disappointed you. I will make it up to you. Oh, Tenno, listen, I have insider tip. Infiltrate, this augment for Prowl, increases your movement speed, and did you know that that movement speed increase is affected by power strength? And did you know that you can sprint when you are on a dash wire in Ivara's Prowl? You can normally not sprint in Prowl. On a dash wire, you can sprint while in Prowl. This leads to a pretty interesting build, and I invite you to check that out in the description. I've linked it for you right at the top of the description, so go check it out. Speaking of the description, if you enjoyed this framework build, I invite you to check out others like it by looking at my main channel page and looking at my framework playlist. I have a whole list of these things. There's a whole bunch of them, and I do more every week, so go check that out. You may be particularly interested in my frameworks for Ashe and Loki, which also feature a very large amount of utility and different ways to engage enemies, along with stealth gameplay. And finally, I want to thank you all very much for watching. Subscribe if you had a good time, check me out elsewhere on the internet through the links in the description, and I'll see you all next time.